The grocery store hummed with the usual sounds of an ordinary afternoon, shopping carts rolling over polished floors, the quiet murmur of conversations, the occasional beeping of a register. People moved through the aisles at a relaxed pace, some browsing, others hurrying to grab last-minute dinner ingredients. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the small Ohio town in a warm glow, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Among the shoppers was a woman in her late 70s, her silver hair pinned neatly in place, her faded blue cardigan buttoned all the way up despite the mild weather. She squinted through her glasses as she reached for a bag of apples, muttering to herself about the price. Her movements were precise, deliberate, as if she had followed this same routine for decades. Nearby, a young man in his mid-20s, tall with an athletic build, stood by the oranges, scrolling through his phone while balancing a grocery basket in his other hand. His name was Marcus, dressed casually in a navy hoodie and jeans, blending in with the everyday rhythm of the store. For a moment, their paths might have remained separate, two strangers moving past each other in the flow of daily life. But then, the woman's eyes flicked toward Marcus, and something in her expression shifted. It wasn't subtle. Her lips pressed together, her gaze hardened, and a quiet tension settled in the air around her. She straightened up, still gripping her apples. "You people don't belong here." The words were spoken just loud enough to be heard by those nearby. Marcus's fingers hovered over his phone. His posture stiffened, but he didn't react immediately. The woman continued, her voice sharper this time. "Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from?" The air in the store thickened. A woman pushing a stroller quickly turned down another aisle. A man near the potatoes stopped mid-reach, his eyes darting between the two. The usual rhythm of the store came to a halt, replaced by a silence that stretched uncomfortably long. Marcus inhaled slowly, lifting his head to meet her stare. His expression remained unreadable, but something in his posture shifted, subtle, controlled. The elderly woman didn't back down. She squared her shoulders as if daring him to respond. Nearby, a young store employee paused mid-stack, glancing between them, uncertain whether to step in or stay out of it. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The moment hung in the air, waiting for what would come next. Marcus stood still, his hand tightening around the handle of his grocery basket. The weight of the woman's words pressed on him like a lead blanket, but he didn't flinch. He could feel the stares of the other shoppers, some shifting uncomfortably, others frozen in place. No one spoke. No one intervened. They were witnesses now, whether they wanted to be or not. The elderly woman clutched her apples tighter, her expression set with unwavering confidence, as if she had said nothing out of the ordinary. Her chin lifted slightly, her body language daring him to challenge her. A young mother near the bread aisle hesitated, glancing between them before turning away, gripping her child's hand a little tighter. A cashier at the far end of the store craned her neck to get a better look. Even those who had initially tried to ignore the exchange now found themselves unable to look away. Marcus exhaled slowly, shifting his basket to his other hand. 1,000 responses raced through his mind. He could walk away. He could yell. He could demand she take her words back. But none of those options felt right. Instead, he let the silence stretch a little longer. Let it settle in the air, thick and undeniable. Finally, he spoke. His voice was calm, steady. "Ma'am, do you even realize what you just said?" His tone wasn't aggressive. It wasn't accusatory. It was something else, something measured, like he was giving her a chance to think about her words before doubling down on them. But she didn't hesitate. "I said what I said," she snapped. "This is my country. People like you don't belong here." The quiet gasp of a woman near the dairy section was almost audible over the silence. A middle-aged man in a baseball cap shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck. A young store clerk stacking bananas stood frozen, his hand still gripping a bunch of fruit, his eyes darting between Marcus and the woman. Still, Marcus didn't react with anger. He didn't move closer, didn't raise his voice. Instead, he let her words hang in the air for everyone to hear, giving them the weight they deserved. "All right," he said, nodding slowly, as if he was reaching a decision. "Let's talk about that, since you brought it up." The air in the store felt electric, charged with something unspoken. Marcus bent down and set his grocery basket on the floor, moving with deliberate care. His calmness wasn't weakness, it was gravity, pulling the attention of everyone in the store toward him. Even those who had been pretending not to listen found themselves leaning in. The elderly woman stiffened, suddenly shifting her weight from one foot to the other. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Marcus met her gaze, his voice quiet but firm. "You said I don't belong here, but let me tell you something about where I come from." The room held its breath. The storm was coming, but it wasn't the kind anyone expected. Marcus stood tall, his presence filling the space between them. His voice, though steady, carried weight. "You said I don't belong here, but let me tell you something about where I come from." The elderly woman's expression flickered. Just for a second, but she quickly squared her shoulders again. The crowd, however, was transfixed. A man near the dairy aisle put his phone down. A young couple near the frozen foods barely breathed. Marcus let the silence stretch before he spoke again. "My great-great-grandfather was born in Mississippi," he said, pausing to let the words settle. "He was a sharecropper, working land he didn't own, breaking his back so his kids might have a better life. His father, my great-great-great-grandfather, he didn't even get that chance. He was stolen from his home, beaten, and sold like property. And for what? To help build the very country you're standing in." The elderly woman's lips tightened. Her grip on the bag of apples shifted slightly, her fingers pressing into the plastic. "My grandfather," Marcus continued, "fought in World War II, risked his life for this country, just like thousands of others. But when he came home, he wasn't treated like a hero. He couldn't sit at the same counters, couldn't drink from the same fountains, couldn't buy a house in neighborhoods where men he fought beside were welcomed with open arms. But he stayed. You know why? Because he believed in the promise of this country, even when it didn't believe in him." The silence in the store deepened. Even the hum of the refrigerators seemed quieter. Some people shifted uncomfortably, but no one left. No one interrupted. "My parents," Marcus continued, "they fought too. Not with guns, not with fists, but by working hard every single day. My mom's a teacher. She spent her life helping kids no matter where they come from, no matter what they look like. My dad's a mechanic, the kind of man who would stop on the side of the road to help someone like you if your car broke down." He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "So when you tell me I don't belong here, that I should go back to Africa, you're ignoring the fact that my family has been here for generations, that we built this country, that we sacrificed for it, that we shed blood, sweat, and tears for it. So tell me, what exactly makes you more American than me?" The elderly woman's face was a mix of emotions: anger, discomfort, something deeper. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her apples. She opened her mouth as if to respond but stopped, the words catching in her throat. Marcus straightened, his voice now carrying the weight of something unshakable. "I could have walked away," he said, his eyes scanning the small crowd now watching intently. "But what good would that do? Ignorance doesn't get better in silence. It's up to all of us to be better than this. Better than words like those." The weight of his words lingered, pressing into the air around them. The store had never been this quiet. Even those who had tried to ignore the scene now stood rooted in place, absorbing every syllable. The elderly woman looked around, searching for support, but found none. A man near the deli counter shifted uncomfortably before stepping forward. "He's right," the man said, his voice breaking the thick silence. "We've got to be better than this." His words were like a trigger. A woman near the frozen foods nodded. "My dad fought in that same war," she murmured, her voice shaking slightly. "He always said the only color that mattered was the red on the flag." A young cashier called out from behind the register. "I've never seen anyone handle something like that with such grace," she said. "Thank you." The elderly woman swallowed hard. Her voice, when it finally came, was quieter now. "I didn't mean—" she started but stopped herself. Marcus's expression softened just slightly. "It's not about what you meant," he said gently. "It's about how it came across. Words matter, actions matter even more." A slow clap started near the deli counter, hesitant at first, then growing. It wasn't just for Marcus's words. It was for the courage it took to confront hate with dignity. The elderly woman looked around one last time, her face pale. Then, without another word, she turned her cart and pushed it toward the exit. As she walked away, a few people moved toward Marcus. A woman placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for saying what needed to be said." Marcus gave a small nod, lifting his basket back into his hands. Sometimes, he murmured, almost to himself, it's not about winning or losing, it's about making sure people hear the truth. The tension that had filled the store was beginning to lift. But the impact of Marcus's words was far from over. The silence that followed Marcus's words was almost deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air like a thick fog. The elderly woman's face was a patchwork of emotions: shock, embarrassment, and something else. Something deeper. For the first time, her rigid posture faltered. Her fingers trembled slightly around the bag of apples. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but nothing came out. A middle-aged man in a baseball cap standing near the deli section shifted uncomfortably before stepping forward. His voice, though quiet, was firm. "He's right. We've got to be better than this." The spell was broken. A murmur rippled through the crowd. An older woman near the frozen foods aisle spoke next, her voice barely above a whisper. "My dad fought in that same war," she said. "He always told us the only color that mattered was the red on the flag." A cashier, no older than 20, called out from behind the register. "I've never seen anyone handle something like that with such grace. Thank you." The elderly woman glanced around the store, her gaze searching for an ally, but none came. The people around her weren't angry. They weren't even looking at her with judgment. They just seemed disappointed. She cleared her throat. "I didn't mean," she started, but the words died in her throat. Marcus's eyes softened, just slightly. "It's not about what you meant, ma'am," he said. "It's about how it came across. Words matter. Actions matter even more." For a moment, she simply stood there, gripping the apples like a lifeline. Then, without another word, she turned her cart and pushed it toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open, and just like that, she was gone. A slow clap started near the deli counter, hesitant at first, then building. One by one, more people joined in. It wasn't raucous or celebratory. It was something quieter, something heavier, a show of respect. Marcus took a steadying breath, the moment settling into his bones. He hadn't planned for any of this. He hadn't walked into that store expecting to become the center of attention, to deliver a history lesson in the middle of the produce aisle, but maybe it had needed to happen. A woman in a red sweater stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for saying what needed to be said." Marcus nodded, lifting his basket back into his hands. "Sometimes," he murmured, "it's not about winning or losing. It's about making sure people hear the truth." Slowly, the store returned to life. The hum of conversation picked up again. Carts squeaked against the tiles. People drifted back to their shopping. But there was something different in the air now. A quiet reflection, a shared understanding. The moment had passed, but its impact was far from over. The grocery store slowly returned to its usual rhythm, carts rolling, quiet conversations resuming, the distant beeping of a register. But the energy in the room had shifted. People weren't just going through the motions anymore. They were thinking, reflecting, processing what had just happened. Marcus took a deep breath, adjusting the basket in his hand as he moved toward the checkout line. The young cashier who had spoken up earlier was still watching him, her hands fidgeting nervously as she scanned the next customer's items. When he reached her register, she hesitated, then met his eyes. "What you said back there, it meant a lot," she said. "People don't always stand up like that, especially with so much grace." Marcus gave her a small but genuine smile. "Sometimes grace is the only way to break through," he replied. "Anger just builds walls." She nodded, clearly still absorbing everything. As she bagged his groceries, she hesitated again before finally asking, "Do you think she'll ever change?" Marcus exhaled slowly. He glanced toward the automatic doors where the elderly woman had walked out just minutes ago. "Some lessons take time to settle," he said. "You can't force someone to change. You just plant the seed and hope it grows." Outside, the sun was beginning to set, stretching golden light across the parking lot. As Marcus walked toward his car, he spotted her. The elderly woman sat in the driver's seat of a dusty sedan, her hands gripping the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. She wasn't crying, wasn't visibly upset, but something about the way she sat there, frozen, lost in thought, told him she was replaying the conversation in her mind. For a moment he considered walking over, saying something, but then he decided against it. Some things weren't about winning an argument or forcing an apology. Some things just had to settle on their own. That evening, Marcus sat across from his father at the kitchen table, recounting the day's events. His father, a man of few words, listened intently, his hands folded in front of him. When Marcus finished, his father leaned back in his chair, nodding thoughtfully. "You did the right thing, son," he finally said. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who was watching. People like her, they might not change overnight, but you planted a seed, and that's all you can do sometimes. Plant the seed and let it grow." Marcus nodded slowly, his father's words settling deep. He hadn't just spoken up for himself today. He had spoken for his grandfather, for his parents, for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And maybe, just maybe, he had spoken for the future too. Across town, the elderly woman sat at her dining table, her dinner untouched. The silence in her home felt heavier than usual. She thought of her own grandchildren, the world they were growing up in, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of change. Word of what had happened in the grocery store spread quickly. By the next day, people were talking about it at the coffee shop, at barber shops, in line at the post office. It wasn't just another small-town incident. It was a conversation starter. "Did you hear what that young man said to Mrs. Walker?" an older gentleman asked his neighbor outside a diner. "Never thought I'd see the day someone stood up to her like that." The neighbor, a woman in her 60s, nodded as she sipped her coffee. "And did you hear how he said it? No yelling, no threats. Just facts, just truth." At the grocery store, employees recounted the moment to each other during their shifts. The young cashier who had rung up Marcus's groceries told her coworkers how she had never seen someone handle ignorance with so much composure. "It was like he wasn't just talking to her," she said. "He was talking to all of us." A local high school teacher, after hearing about the incident, decided to bring it up in her history class. She wrote a single question on the board: "What makes someone belong?" Her students debated, their voices animated as they explored what it meant to be part of a country built on generations of struggle, sacrifice, and resilience. Even at church that Sunday, the conversation found its way into the pastor's sermon. "We all have biases, whether we admit it or not," he told the congregation. "But what matters is whether we're willing to listen, to learn, to change." And then there was Mrs. Walker. For years, she had been known around town for her sharp tongue and unfiltered opinions. People tolerated her, dismissed her, even avoided her when possible. But now they looked at her differently, not with anger, but with something else. Pity, maybe, or hope. She kept to herself for days after the grocery store incident, didn't go to the bakery for her usual morning rolls, didn't stop by the library for the latest mystery novel. It wasn't until nearly a week later that she returned to the store, moving through the aisles quietly, avoiding eye contact. At the checkout, she hesitated before speaking to the young cashier. She cleared her throat. "About the other day," she trailed off, gripping her purse a little tighter. The cashier looked at her carefully, waiting. I, "I've been thinking," Mrs. Walker said, her voice quieter than usual. Her hands fidgeted as she glanced down at her cart, then back up. "I suppose we could all do a little better." The words weren't much, but they were something. A crack in the wall, a sign that the seed Marcus had planted was beginning to take root. And across town, Marcus went about his life, unaware of how far his words had traveled. He hadn't set out to change anything that day in the grocery store. He had only spoken the truth, but sometimes the truth was enough. A week had passed since that afternoon in the grocery store, but the weight of it still lingered. Marcus hadn't spoken about it much since telling his father. Life moved on. Bills still had to be paid, work had to be done, and people still went about their daily routines. But something felt different. It was in the way people looked at him when he walked into town. Not with pity, not with admiration, just with acknowledgement. A silent understanding that something important had happened that day. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sun dip below the rooftops, he thought about the woman from the store. Mrs. Walker. Had she changed? Would she ever? He didn't know. Maybe she would carry on as she always had, letting old beliefs dictate her view of the world. Or maybe, just maybe, something he said had stayed with her. He thought about his grandfather, the stories his father had told him growing up, the sacrifices, the struggles, the quiet endurance of generations before him. He had never seen himself as a spokesperson for anything, but in that moment at the grocery store, he realized he hadn't just spoken for himself. He had spoken for them. And maybe, without even meaning to, he had spoken for others too. People who had been told they didn't belong. People who had swallowed their words instead of standing up. People who had been waiting for someone to say the things they never could. Across town, Mrs. Walker sat at her dining table, her plate of food barely touched. She had always thought of herself as someone who had seen the world for what it was. But now, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't so sure. Her mind kept going back to Marcus's words, his family's history, the way he had looked at her, not with anger, but with something else, something steadier. She exhaled, rubbing her hands over her face. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe it wasn't too late to change. This story isn't just about a grocery store. It's not just about one conversation. It's about the moments that force us to look at ourselves, the moments that challenge us to be better. It's about how hate is loud, but dignity is louder. How the truth doesn't need to be shouted to be heard, and how sometimes the simplest act of standing up can shake the ground beneath us. If this story moved you, share it. Have the hard conversations. Be the one to break the cycle, because change doesn't start with someone else. It starts with you.